Hey guys, tonight we're taking a deep dive, not into the tranquil, sun-drenched sands of ancient Egypt you might imagine, but into the shadowy, often brutal underbelly of their spiritual world. Forget the serene images of golden sarcophagi and gentle gods. We're peeling back the papyrus to reveal a faith far more complex, and frankly, a lot more terrifying than your history books let on. You're about to discover that while the Nile brought life, the beliefs that sprang from its banks could be surprisingly unforgiving. If you were living back then, navigating the whims of their pantheon, you'd probably be walking on eggshells, constantly aware that one wrong step could lead to divine retribution. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know where you're tuning in from, and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Imagine yourself in a dimly lit chamber, perhaps within a temple complex, or even a private home. The air is heavy with the scent of herbs and something else, something sharp and metallic. Before you, a priest or a skilled magician meticulously works. This isn't about healing or protection, it's about destruction. For the ancient Egyptians, magic wasn't just parlor tricks, it was a potent force, a means to influence the world, to compel the gods, and to exert power over others. And sometimes, that power was wielded with devastating intent against their enemies. You drift back through the millennia, the air growing thick with the scent of dried river mud and a faint, sweet hint of incense. The sun, a relentless eye in the cerulean sky, beats down on the ochre landscape. You stand on the banks of the mighty Nile, the lifeblood of this ancient civilization, and as you gaze across its shimmering surface, you feel a peculiar sense of calm. This is the Egypt of your dreams, a land of pyramids reaching for the heavens, of hieroglyphs whispering tales of pharaohs and gods, of a people seemingly at peace with their world and their deities. But as the sun dips lower, casting long, skeletal shadows across the sand, a different truth begins to emerge. The most prominent form of this destructive magic was the execration ritual. You've heard whispers of it, perhaps seen fleeting references, but to truly grasp its power, you must understand its purpose. Execration rituals were designed to symbolically destroy enemies, whether they were foreign invaders, rebellious subjects, or even malevolent spirits and deities. The belief was that by ritually destroying an image or representation of the enemy, you could inflict real, tangible harm upon them in the physical world. It was a form of sympathetic magic, where the part stood for the whole, and the symbolic act had real-world consequences. You see, the popular image of ancient Egyptian religion is one of harmonious balance, of gentle gods, and a serene journey to the afterlife. You picture Osiris, the benevolent ruler of the underworld, Isis, the nurturing mother, and Ra, the life-giving sun god. And yes, these aspects were undeniably present. The concept of Ma'at, the cosmic order, pervaded every facet of their existence, promising justice, truth, and equilibrium. It's a beautiful, comforting thought. Isn't it a world where everything has its place, where the scales of justice are perfectly balanced? You watch as the magician prepares his materials. Perhaps it's a small clay figurine, roughly shaped in the likeness of a human, or a piece of papyrus inscribed with the name of the enemy. Sometimes it might even be a shard of pottery or a block of stone. The key is the name. For the Egyptians, a name was more than just a label. It was an intrinsic part of a person's being, their essence. To write down an enemy's name was to capture their very soul, to gain power over them. But peel back that comforting veneer and you start to see the cracks. You begin to notice the fierce glint in the eye of Sekhmet, the lioness goddess, whose breath could bring plague. You hear the whispers of Set, the god of chaos, whose unpredictable nature threatened to unravel the very fabric of existence. You realize that for every gentle deity, there was a formidable counterpart. And often, the line between benevolent protector and terrifying punisher was incredibly thin, if it existed at all. The ritual begins. The magician chants incantations invoking powerful deities like Sekhmet, Set, or even the sun god Ra. But in his destructive aspect, the words are not pleas, they are commands, binding the gods to the magician's will, directing their formidable power towards the chosen target. You hear the rhythmic drone of the spells, feeling the oppressive weight of their intent. Imagine yourself as an ordinary Egyptian, living your daily life along the Nile. Every sunrise is a testament to Ra's triumph over the serpent of chaos. Apep, every flood of the Nile, while bringing life, also carries the potential for devastating destruction. A reminder of the gods' immense power and their capacity for both creation and annihilation. You are constantly aware of the unseen forces at play, the delicate balance that could be tipped at any moment. Your existence isn't just about farming and family. It's a perpetual negotiation with the divine, a constant effort to maintain favor and avoid wrath. Then comes the act of destruction. The clay figure is smashed, perhaps pierced with thorns or knives, then burned. The papyrus is torn, spat upon, and then consumed by fire. The pottery shard is shattered. Each act of violence, however symbolic, is performed with intense focus and malicious intent. The magician might even bind the object, wrapping it tightly with linen to further restrict the enemy's power. It's like sending a really angry email. But instead of hitting send, you literally set fire to the server. You learn quickly that the gods are not to be trifled with. Their power is absolute, their judgment swift. While they might grant you a bountiful harvest or safe passage through the afterlife, they could just as easily unleash pestilence, famine, or the terror of the Duat, the underworld, upon you. This isn't a religion of passive worship. It's an active, often anxious, engagement with forces that hold your very fate in their hands. These rituals weren't just private affairs. Sometimes they were performed on a grand scale, orchestrated by the state, with the pharaoh himself or his high priest presiding. Imagine a public ceremony where the names of rebellious vassals or hostile foreign rulers are read aloud, their effigies brought forth, and then ritually destroyed before a gathered crowd. This served not only as a magical attack, but also as a powerful psychological deterrent, sending a clear message to anyone who dared to defy the pharaoh or threaten the stability of Egypt. It was a demonstration of divine might, a warning that the forces of Ma'at would crush any who stood against them. Consider the very concept of Ma'at. It sounds so peaceful, so orderly, doesn't it? Truth, justice, cosmic balance. But how was this balance maintained? Not just through good deeds and virtuous living, but through a constant, vigilant struggle against Isfet, the opposing force of chaos. And this struggle often manifested in ways that were far from serene. The most famous examples of these execration texts come from the Middle Kingdom, where lists of enemies, both foreign lands and internal rebels, were inscribed on pottery bowls or clay figures. These items would then be ritually smashed, buried, or burned, often near tombs or sacred sites, to ensure the permanent destruction of the listed foes. These weren't just abstract enemies, they were specific threats to the Egyptian state, and the magic was intended to neutralize them. You see the pharaoh, the living embodiment of Horus, standing as the ultimate defender of Ma'at. His role isn't just to rule, it's to actively combat chaos, both within the kingdom and beyond its borders. This divine mandate often translated into military campaigns, into the brutal suppression of rebellions, and into the ritualistic destruction of enemies. When the pharaoh struck down a foe, it wasn't merely an act of war, it was a sacred act, a reaffirmation of Ma'at, a necessary violence to preserve cosmic order. It's like your mom telling you to clean your room for order, but instead of a vacuum cleaner, like she's wielding a divine mace. Just kidding, mostly. Beyond formal execration rituals, individuals also practiced simpler forms of cursing and defensive magic. If you felt wronged by a neighbor, or if you suspected someone of casting an evil eye upon you, you might seek out a local magician or perform a simple spell yourself. These could involve writing the person's name on a piece of papyrus and burying it, or using specific amulets and charms to deflect their ill intentions back upon them. It was a world where personal grievances could quickly escalate into magical warfare, where a bad harvest might be blamed on a neighbor's curse, and where a sudden illness could be attributed to a malevolent spell. Think about the judicial system. While the ideal was justice and fairness, the punishments for transgressions could be severe: theft, blasphemy, or any act that disturbed the social order, which was seen as a reflection of the divine order, could lead to mutilation, forced labor, or even death. These weren't just civil penalties. They were seen as necessary measures to restore Mayat, to appease the gods, and to prevent the entire society from spiraling into chaos. The justice system was intertwined with their religious beliefs, making every legal judgment a spiritual one. The concept of binding spells was also prevalent. These spells were designed not necessarily to kill, but to neutralize an enemy's power, to render them helpless or ineffective. You might find texts describing how to bind the tongue of an opponent in court, or how to prevent a rival from succeeding in business. These were subtle, yet powerful forms of magical aggression, designed to undermine an enemy without necessarily resorting to outright destruction. Even the afterlife, often depicted as a blissful paradise, held its own terrors. You prepare your entire life for this journey, meticulously following rituals, preserving your body, and reciting spells from the Book of the Dead. But the journey itself is fraught with peril. You face monstrous guardians, treacherous landscapes, and the ultimate judgment before Osiris. Failure means annihilation. Your soul devoured by the beast Ammit, the devourer of the dead? A creature with the head of a crocodile, the torso of a lion, and the hindquarters of a hippopotamus. Not exactly a gentle stroll through a field of lilies, is it? It's more like a really intense job interview where the stakes are, well, eternal oblivion. One common historical fact about execration texts is that they provide invaluable insights into ancient Egyptian foreign policy and their perception of external threats. By studying the names of the lands and peoples listed in these texts, historians can reconstruct the geopolitical landscape of different periods, identifying who Egypt considered its primary adversaries. It's like finding a really old enemies list that also doubles as a magical hit list. This constant awareness of divine judgment and potential retribution shaped every aspect of their lives. From the way they built their temples to the prayers they uttered, from the offerings they made to the laws they upheld, everything was designed to maintain favor with the gods and to keep chaos at bay. It was a demanding faith, one that required constant vigilance and a deep respect, or perhaps fear, of the immense power held by the divine. A lesser-known detail involves the use of red ink in execration texts. Red was the color associated with chaos, evil, and the god set. When writing the names of enemies or malevolent forces in execration rituals, scribes would often use red ink, further emphasizing the destructive and negative intent of the spell. This wasn't just an aesthetic choice, it was a deliberate magical act, imbuing the words with the power of chaos to turn against the enemy. One common historical fact that often gets overlooked in the peaceful Egypt narrative is the sheer number of deities and their often conflicting domains. While there was a general pantheon, many gods had very specific, and sometimes overlapping, responsibilities. For instance, you have Sobek, the crocodile god, associated with the Nile's fertility but also its dangers and fierce power. Then there's Taweret, the hippopotamus goddess who protected pregnant women and childbirth, but whose fearsome appearance also served to ward off evil. It's a complex web of divine influence, where understanding who to appeal to for what, and how to avoid offending another, was a lifelong endeavor. And here's a point of ongoing academic debate. Historians still debate the precise efficacy and psychological impact of these execration rituals. While the Egyptians clearly believed in their power, modern scholars often discuss whether their primary function was truly magical destruction or more about psychological warfare, boosting the morale of the Egyptians and terrifying their enemies through reputation. Was it about truly killing someone from afar, or about creating a powerful narrative of control and dominance? A lesser-known detail that highlights the less than peaceful aspects is the practice of execration rituals. These were not just symbolic gestures, they were powerful magical rites designed to literally destroy enemies, both human and divine. You might find clay figures inscribed with the names of enemies, or even foreign lands, which would then be ritually smashed, burned, or stabbed. The intent was to inflict real harm, to break the power of the enemy through magical means. It's a bit like putting a hex on your annoying neighbor, but with the full backing of the state and the gods. This wasn't about peaceful coexistence, it was about active magical warfare. The fear of curses and malevolent magic was pervasive. You would wear amulets for protection, not just against physical harm, but against unseen magical attacks, the Eye of Horus, the Ankh, scarabs. These weren't just pretty trinkets. They were powerful talismans imbued with protective magic. You might even have a small figurine of Bez, the dwarf god, in your home. His grotesque appearance designed to scare away evil spirits and nightmares. And here's a point of ongoing academic debate. Historians still debate whether the concept of sin, as understood in Abrahamic religions, truly existed in ancient Egypt, or if transgressions were viewed more as disturbances of ma'at actions that upset the cosmic balance rather than moral failings in a personal sense. While there were certainly ethical codes, the emphasis was often on the consequences of actions for the cosmic order rather than an inherent moral evil. This nuanced understanding of their ethical framework further complicates the idea of a purely peaceful religion. Even the gods themselves were not immune to magical coercion. While Egyptians revered their deities, they also believed that through proper rituals and knowledge of their secret names, they could compel the gods to act on their behalf. This wasn't blasphemy. It was a sophisticated understanding of the cosmic order, where even divine beings had their place and could be influenced by those who understood the underlying magical principles. It's like knowing the secret cheat code for a video game that makes the boss fight easier. You begin to understand that their religion wasn't just a set of beliefs, it was a dynamic, living system that permeated every breath, every decision, every fear. It was a system that demanded respect, obedience, and sometimes a willingness to embrace the harsh realities of a world constantly teetering on the edge of chaos. The peace you initially perceived was not an absence of conflict, but rather the result of an ongoing, often brutal struggle to maintain order against the ever-present threat of disorder. And as you stand there, feeling the ancient dust settle on your skin, you realize that the gentle hum of the fan in your room is a far cry from the anxious thrum of life under the watchful, often stern, eyes of the Egyptian gods. Think about the curses inscribed on tombs. These weren't just warnings to grave robbers. They were active spells designed to inflict terrible suffering upon anyone who dared to desecrate the resting place of the deceased. You might read inscriptions threatening that the intruder would have no heir, no place to rest in the afterlife, or that they would be devoured by the very demons of the Duat. These were not idle threats. They were believed to be magically binding, ensuring the eternal torment of anyone who violated the sanctity of the tomb. It's the ultimate do not disturb sign, backed by divine retribution. You still feel the ancient dust on your skin, a subtle grit that reminds you of the immense passage of time. The gentle hum of your fan is a distant echo, replaced by the imagined rustle of papyrus and the distant chanting from a temple. You've just begun to grasp that the serenity often associated with ancient Egypt was, in fact, a carefully constructed illusion, a fragile shield against the ever-present forces of chaos. Tonight, we're going to delve deeper into the very bedrock of their cosmic order Mayat. The Egyptians also used magic to combat natural phenomena they perceived as chaotic or harmful. Spells were cast to ward off venomous snakes and scorpions, to protect against floods, or to ensure a bountiful harvest. While these might seem like benign uses of magic, they were still rooted in the idea of compelling the forces of nature, of imposing order Mayat upon potential chaos. Isfet. You've heard the name, perhaps in passing. Ma'at sounds so elegant, so balanced. And indeed, it represents truth, justice, harmony, balance, order, and reciprocity. It was the fundamental principle that governed the universe, from the rising of the sun to the flooding of the Nile, from the actions of the gods to the behavior of every man, woman, and child. Without Mayat, everything would descend into Isfet chaos, disorder, injustice. It was the cosmic glue that held their world together. But here's the thing about cosmic glue sometimes. It needs a very firm hand to apply it. You realize that magic was not a separate, niche practice. It was deeply interwoven with their religion, their daily lives, and their understanding of the universe. It was a tool for protection, for healing, and crucially, for offense. When faced with an enemy, whether human or supernatural, the ancient Egyptians did not hesitate to unleash the full force of their magical arsenal, believing that these destructive spells were just as vital as any sword or arrow in the defense of their land and their cosmic order. Imagine Mayat not as a gentle breeze, but as an iron fist, constantly pushing back against the encroaching darkness. It wasn't a passive state. It was an active, relentless struggle. Every good deed, every just ruling, every successful harvest, every victorious battle, all were affirmations of Ma'at. And conversely, every crime, every act of injustice, every famine, every defeat, these were manifestations of Isfet. Threats to the very fabric of existence that had to be brutally suppressed. As the imagined chants fade and the scent of burning effigies dissipates, you feel a new appreciation for the pragmatic and sometimes brutal nature of ancient Egyptian magic. It wasn't just about gentle prayers and offerings, it was about active intervention, about compelling the universe to bend to their will, and about ensuring the annihilation of anything that threatened their peace. The hum of your fan now sounds like a distant incantation, a subtle reminder that even in stillness, unseen forces are at play. And sometimes, the most peaceful-seeming cultures had the most potent ways of cursing their enemies into oblivion. You, as an ancient Egyptian, are born into this worldview. From your earliest days, you are taught the importance of Ma'at. Your parents instill in you the virtues of honesty, respect for elders, and obedience to the Pharaoh. Your priests preach about the consequences of wrongdoing, not just for your own soul, but for the stability of the entire cosmos. It's a heavy burden, isn't it? Knowing that your personal actions could literally upset the balance of the universe? It's like forgetting to take out the trash. And suddenly, the moon falls out of the sky. Okay, maybe not that dramatic, but you get the idea. You've navigated the terrifying duet, and you've witnessed the potent, destructive power of Egyptian magic. Now, as the faint echoes of ancient curses fade into the gentle hum of your fan, you turn your gaze from the individual and the ritual to the grandest stage of all the Pharaoh. Tonight, we explore how the divine mandate of the Pharaoh transformed warfare from mere conquest into a holy crusade, justifying bloodshed and expansion under the sacred banner of Ma'at. The Pharaoh, as we touched upon, was the chief enforcer of Ma'at. He wasn't just a king, he was a living god, the embodiment of Horus, the divine protector. His primary duty was to uphold Ma'at and crush Isfet wherever it appeared. This wasn't a suggestion. It was his sacred responsibility, divinely ordained. When the Pharaoh went to war, it wasn't just for conquest or resources, it was a holy war. A necessary act to expand the domain of Ma'at and push back the forces of chaos from the borders of Egypt. You see him depicted on temple walls, smiting his enemies with a mace, their bodies piled beneath him. This isn't just propaganda, it's a visual representation of his cosmic duty, a brutal affirmation of order. Imagine yourself standing amidst a vast army, the sun glinting off bronze weapons and the standards of various gnomes fluttering in the desert breeze. The air vibrates with the rhythmic beat of drums and the shouts of commanders. This isn't just a military expedition, it's a religious procession. At the head of this formidable force rides the Pharaoh, not merely a king, but the living embodiment of Horus, the divine falcon god. His presence sanctifies the entire endeavor, transforming every soldier into an instrument of divine will, and every battle into a cosmic struggle against chaos. Think about the sheer scale of this responsibility. The Pharaoh was accountable for the Nile's flood, for the fertility of the land, for the health of his people, and for the very rising of the sun. If things went wrong, if the Nile failed to flood, if famine struck, if invaders threatened, it could be interpreted as a sign that the Pharaoh had failed in his duty to Ma'at, or that Isfet was gaining the upper hand. This placed immense pressure on the ruler, driving him to maintain order with an iron grip. For the ancient Egyptians, war was not simply a political or economic necessity, it was a religious imperative. The Pharaoh's primary duty, as the upholder of Ma'at, was to protect Egypt from the encroaching forces of Isfet, chaos and disorder. This extended beyond the borders of the Nile Valley. Foreign lands, particularly those that resisted Egyptian dominance, were often viewed as realms of chaos, populated by peoples who did not adhere to Ma'at. Therefore, conquering them, subjugating them, or even annihilating them was seen as a righteous act, a necessary extension of Ma'at's benevolent order. It's like your dad telling you to clean your room up, but instead of just your room, it's the entire neighborhood, and he's bringing a tank. The judicial system was a direct extension of Ma'at. Judges were seen as servants of Ma'at. their decisions meant to reflect divine truth and restore balance. When a crime was committed, it wasn't just a transgression against an individual or the state. It was a disturbance of Ma'at itself. Therefore, the punishments weren't just about deterrence. They were about purification, about reestablishing the cosmic order that had been disrupted. You see the Pharaoh, resplendent in his regalia, leading his troops into battle. On temple walls, he is depicted as a colossal figure, single-handedly smiting hordes of enemies with a mace, their bodies piled beneath his feet. These aren't just artistic exaggerations. They are theological statements. Each blow he strikes is a reaffirmation of Ma'at, each vanquished foe a defeated manifestation of Isfet. The Pharaoh is not just a warrior, he is a cosmic hero, battling the forces of darkness on behalf of all creation. For lesser crimes, you might face public flogging, forced labor in the quarries or fields, or even mutilation, the cutting off of hands or noses for repeat offenders or specific offenses. Imagine the chilling spectacle of such a punishment, a stark reminder of the consequences of defying Ma'at. It's a visceral demonstration of the state's power, and by extension, the gods' power, to enforce order. It's a bit like getting a parking ticket, but instead of a fine, they take your car keys permanently, and maybe a finger. Think about the psychological impact on the soldiers. They weren't just fighting for land or loot. They were fighting for the gods, for the very order of the universe. Their pharaoh was a god on earth, and to fight alongside him, to participate in his holy war, was to partake in a sacred act. This divine justification instilled a powerful sense of purpose and righteousness, transforming what might otherwise be brutal slaughter into a divinely sanctioned mission. It's like playing a video game where your character is literally a god, and every enemy you defeat gives you bonus points for saving the universe. For more serious offenses, particularly those involving blasphemy, treason, or grave disturbances of the social order, the penalty was often death, and not always a quick, merciful death. Sometimes it involved impalement, burning, or drowning in the Nile. These extreme measures were not acts of gratuitous cruelty, at least not in their eyes. They were seen as necessary to utterly expunge the Isfet that the criminal represented, to purify the land, and to send a clear message to anyone else contemplating similar acts. The body of the condemned might even be denied proper burial, a terrifying prospect for a people who believed so strongly in the afterlife. This denial was the ultimate punishment, condemning the soul to eternal wandering and annihilation. The spoils of war, too, were often dedicated to the gods. Captured enemies might be brought back to Egypt as slaves, their labor used to build temples and monuments, thus contributing to the glory of the gods and the maintenance of Ma'at. Foreign treasures, livestock, and resources were presented as offerings in temples, further enriching the cults and demonstrating the pharaoh's success in extending divine order. The wealth generated by conquest was directly channeled back into the religious infrastructure, reinforcing the cycle of divine mandate and military expansion. One common historical fact that underscores the brutal enforcement of Ma'at is the existence of the Medjay police force. While often depicted as desert scouts, they also served as internal security, maintaining order, guarding important sites, and apprehending criminals. Their presence was a constant reminder that the pharaoh's authority, and thus Ma'at, was enforced not just by divine will, but by very human, very armed agents. They were the ancient Egyptian equivalent of a SWAT team, but with more linen and less tactical gear. The concept of divine kingship was paramount. The pharaoh was not merely chosen by the gods, he was a god, the son of Ra, the incarnation of Horus. This divine status gave him absolute authority, and his decisions, including those to wage war, were considered divinely inspired and unchallengeable. To question the pharaoh's military campaigns was to question the will of the gods, an act of blasphemy that could bring chaos upon the land. A lesser-known detail about Ma'at's enforcement comes from the Dream Book Papyri. These ancient texts listed various dreams and their interpretations, often linking them to the state of Ma'at in the dreamer's life. A good dream might signify Ma'at's favor, while a bad dream could indicate a disturbance of order, perhaps due to an unconfessed sin or an impending misfortune. This shows how deeply the concept of Ma'at permeated individual psychology, and how even subconscious thoughts were seen through its lens. It's like your dreams being audited by the cosmic IRS, You might hear the priests proclaiming the pharaoh's victories in grand hymns, attributing every success to the favor of Amun-Ra, the chief state god. The gods, particularly Amun-Ra, were often depicted as actively participating in battles, granting strength to the pharaoh and striking fear into the hearts of his enemies. This divine intervention wasn't just a comforting thought, it was a core belief that fueled the pharaoh's confidence and the army's morale. It's like having a really good coach, but your coach is literally a divine being who can summon lightning. And here's a point of ongoing academic debate. Historians still debate the extent to which the concept of Ma'at was truly internalized by the common people, or if it was primarily a top-down ideology enforced by the elite. While the ideal was certainly pervasive, the practical application and individual adherence to Ma'at in daily life, especially among the lower classes, remains a subject of scholarly discussion. Was it a deeply held personal conviction, or a pragmatic necessity for survival under a strict regime? Consider the treatment of conquered peoples. While some were integrated into the Egyptian system, others faced brutal subjugation. Rebellions were met with swift and merciless force, often involving mass executions, the burning of towns, and the deportation of populations. These acts, while horrific, were justified as necessary measures to crush Isfet and re-establish Ma'at. The pharaoh's justice was swift and absolute, reflecting the unyielding nature of cosmic order. The constant battle against Isfet wasn't just about human actions, but it was also about cosmic forces. Every night, the sun god Ra journeyed through the Duat, the underworld, battling the serpent Apep, the embodiment of chaos. This nightly struggle was a terrifying reminder that order was never guaranteed, that it had to be fought for, every single day. And the rituals performed by priests in temples, the daily offerings, the elaborate festivals, these were all designed to aid Ra in his cosmic battle. To reinforce Ma'at and prevent the world from plunging into eternal darkness, the construction of monumental temples, like those at Karnak and Luxor, often served as giant propaganda pieces for the pharaoh's military prowess. Their walls are covered with detailed reliefs depicting battles, sieges, and the triumphant return of the pharaoh with his captives and spoils. These weren't just historical records, they were permanent, sacred affirmations of the pharaoh's divine mandate to conquer, to maintain order through force, and to expand the dominion of Ma'at. You walk through these halls, dwarfed by the scale of the carvings, and you feel the weight of their power, the undeniable message of divine authority and military might. You participate in these rituals, perhaps as a spectator, perhaps as a minor participant if you're lucky enough to be involved in temple life. You watch as priests meticulously perform their duties, chanting ancient spells, burning fragrant incense, and making offerings to the gods. You feel the collective anxiety and hope in the air, the shared understanding that the fate of the world rests on these sacred acts. It's not just about appeasing the gods, it's about actively participating in the cosmic struggle, lending your energy, your belief, to the forces of order. One common historical fact that exemplifies the pharaoh's holy war is the Battle of Kadesh under Ramesses II. While often presented as a tactical draw, Ramesses' inscriptions at his temples depicted as a resounding victory, achieved through his personal bravery and the direct intervention of Amun. He is shown single-handedly routing the Hittite army, a testament to his divine power and a clear example of how military campaigns were framed within a religious narrative. Even the construction of the massive temples and pyramids was an act of upholding Ma'at. These monumental structures were not merely tombs or places of worship, they were cosmic machines, designed to connect the earthly realm with the divine, to channel divine energy, and to solidify the pharaoh's role as the intermediary between gods and men. The precision of their alignment, the intricate carvings, the sheer scale, all were testaments to the Egyptian belief in order and their relentless pursuit of it. It's like building a really, really big Lego set. But if you put one brick in the wrong place, the universe might implode. A lesser-known detail about the religious justification for war involves the smiting scene motif. This iconic image, showing the pharaoh grasping a group of enemies by the hair and raising a mace to strike them down, appeared on temple pylons and royal monuments for millennia. It wasn't just a symbol of royal power, it was a ritualistic depiction of the pharaoh's cosmic duty to eliminate chaos and disorder, a perpetual magical act of triumph over evil. The image itself was believed to actively repel enemies and maintain Ma'at. It's like having a permanent "no bad guys allowed" sign on your front door. But it's a giant stone pharaoh about to smack someone. Remember the execration rituals we mentioned? Those weren't just for external enemies. Sometimes, they were used against internal threats, against rebels or traitors who dared to challenge the pharaoh's authority, which was, by definition, a challenge to Ma'at itself. The very act of naming an enemy and ritually destroying their effigy was a powerful psychological tool, both for those performing the ritual and for anyone who witnessed its symbolic power. It sent a clear message: defy Ma'at, defy the pharaoh, and you will be annihilated, both in this life and the next. And here's a point of ongoing academic debate. Historians still debate the extent to which the pharaohs genuinely believed in their own divine status as literally incarnate gods, versus it being a highly effective political and religious ideology used to consolidate power and justify their actions. While the system certainly functioned as if they were divine, the nuances of personal belief versus statecraft remain a complex area of scholarly discussion. The concept of negative confession in the afterlife judgment also highlights the active role you had in maintaining Ma'at. When you stood before Osiris and the 42 divine judges, you had to recite a list of declarations, stating all the evils you had not committed. I have not stolen. I have not killed. I have not lied. This wasn't just about confessing sins. It was about affirming your adherence to Ma'at throughout your life. It was a rigorous self-examination, a final test of your commitment to cosmic order. It's basically a cosmic lie detector test. And if you fail, you get eaten by a monster. No pressure. The military campaigns were often preceded and accompanied by elaborate religious ceremonies. Priests would consult oracles, interpret omens, and perform rituals to ensure divine favor for the upcoming battles. The army itself might carry sacred standards or effigies of gods into battle, believing that the deities were literally marching alongside them, offering protection and ensuring victory. This intertwining of military and religious practice made every engagement a sacred undertaking. So, while the idea of a peaceful, harmonious ancient Egypt is appealing, the reality was far more nuanced. Ma'at was a demanding mistress, requiring constant vigilance, strict adherence, and sometimes brutal enforcement. The iron fist of order was always at play, pushing back against the encroaching chaos, ensuring that the sun would rise, the Nile would flood, and the world would continue to exist. And you, as an inhabitant of this ancient land, lived every day acutely aware of this delicate balance, knowing that your actions, however small, contributed to the cosmic struggle between order and disorder. The gentle hum of your fan now seems like a fragile shield against the echoes of ancient struggles. A reminder that even in stillness, the universe is in constant motion, maintaining its balance with a firm, unwavering hand. Even the very act of building fortifications and border defenses was seen as a religious duty. These structures were not just physical barriers, they were magical defenses, imbued with spells and prayers to ward off evil and protect the sacred land of Egypt from the forces of chaos beyond its borders. The soldiers guarding these outposts were not just sentries, they were guardians of Ma'at, standing vigil against the encroaching darkness. You still feel the chill of Ma'at's stern justice, a remnant of Part 2 as you realize that cosmic order is not always maintained by peaceful means. Now turn your attention from abstract principles to the living, breathing, and sometimes terrifying entities that made up the ancient Egyptian pantheon. You are used to images of benevolent gods, givers of blessing and protection. But tonight we will meet other aspects of the divine gods of wrath, who can unleash divine fury in ways that will make you shudder. The pharaoh's role as shepherd of his people also implied a responsibility to protect them from all threats, both internal and external. When foreign powers encroached or internal rebellions flared, it was his divine duty to restore order, even if it required immense violence. This protective aspect of his divine mandate often led to brutal suppression of dissent and aggressive military expansion, all under the guise of maintaining the well-being of his divinely chosen people. Picture yourself walking through a dimly lit temple corridor, the walls covered with images of the gods. You see Ra, the sun god, with the radiant sun disk overhead, bringing light and life. You see Isis, the great mother, spreading her protective wings. But then, you stop before another image. A goddess with a lion's head, fiery eyes, and a fierce gaze. This is Sekhmet, the Mighty One, goddess of war, and bringer of plagues. You realize that the ancient Egyptian state was a theocracy in the truest sense, where religion and governance were inseparable. The pharaoh's authority stemmed directly from the gods, and his actions, including his wars, were seen as fulfilling a divine plan. This profound religious justification for conquest and bloodshed paints a picture far removed from the serene, peaceful image often associated with ancient Egypt. It shows a civilization that understood the necessity of force and the power of divine mandate to maintain its place in a chaotic world. You've probably heard the story of Sekhmet. It's one of the most famous ancient Egyptian myths, and it perfectly illustrates the terrifying aspect of the divine. According to the legend, Ra, the sun god, became frustrated with humanity. They had become rebellious and disobedient, and Ra decided to punish them. He sent the Eye of Ra, an aspect of himself, to Earth in the form of the goddess Hathor. But Hathor, once she had tasted blood, transformed into the bloodthirsty Sekhmet, and she began to slaughter humanity with unbridled fury. As the imagined sounds of ancient battles fade and the echoes of pharaonic decrees recede, you feel the comforting hum of your fan. But you now carry a deeper understanding of the ancient Egyptian worldview. Their wars were not mere conflicts. They were holy crusades, fought with divine backing and justified by the sacred struggle against chaos. The peace they enjoyed within their borders was often forged through the brutal application of power and the unswavering belief that their pharaoh was a god, divinely mandated to conquer and to shed blood in the name of cosmic order. You can picture the scene, the screams, the chaos, as Sekhmet rushed through the cities, plague and death in her wake. She wasn't just killing, she was carrying out a purge, a brutal cleansing. Ra, seeing the extent of the destruction, regretted his decision. But Sekhmet was so intoxicated by the carnage that she couldn't stop. To stop her, the gods had to trick her. They brewed a large quantity of beer and dyed it red with ochre to look like blood. Sekhmet, thinking it was human blood, drank it until she was drunk and fell asleep. When she awoke, her rage had dissipated, and she returned to her gentler form as Hathor. This story is more than just an entertaining myth. It is a poignant reminder that the gods can bring terrible destruction. Sekhmet is not a literal evil deity. She is an instrument of divine retribution, a manifestation of Ra's anger. But to you, an ancient Egyptian, she is a terrifying reality. You will see her priests performing rituals to appease her, especially during times of plague or war. You will see her statues placed in temples, her stone eyes seemingly watching your every move. A reminder that divine wrath is always lurking. It's like having a very kind aunt. But if you anger her, she turns into a lion and eats all your cookies. You've witnessed the Pharaoh's holy wars, the divine justification for conquest and bloodshed, a stark contrast to the serene image of ancient Egypt. Now, as the imagined trumpets of battle fade, and the echoes of triumphant hymns recede, you prepare for a different kind of conflict, one that erupted not on the battlefield, but within the very heart of Egyptian faith itself. Tonight, we delve into the radical, often violent, religious revolution of Akhenaten, a pharaoh whose attempt to reshape the divine order led to unprecedented upheaval and a fierce backlash. Next, you go deeper into the darkness, and you meet another god, one whose presence is a constant reminder of chaos and violence. Set, with the head of an unknown beast, square ears, and a crooked snout, Set is the god of the desert. Storms, chaos, violence, and foreign lands. He is the murderer of his brother, Osiris, and the eternal enemy of his nephew, Horus. Imagine yourself in the opulent city of Thebes, the spiritual capital of Egypt, dominated by the colossal temples of Amun-Ra. The air is thick with the scent of offerings, the murmurs of countless priests, and the pervasive sense of tradition. For centuries, Amun-Ra had reigned supreme. The king of the gods, his cult immensely powerful and wealthy. You, as an ordinary Egyptian, would have known his name, his temples, and his priests as central to your life, a constant, unchanging force. You know the story. Right Osiris, the benevolent king of Egypt, was envied by Set. Set tricked Osiris into an elaborate chest, then sealed it and threw it into the Nile. When Isis, Osiris's wife, found her husband's body, Set chopped it into pieces and scattered them across Egypt. Although Isis was able to reassemble Osiris and resurrect him long enough to conceive Horus, Set's actions introduced death and chaos into the world. Then, a new pharaoh ascends the throne, Amenhotep IV. At first, things seem normal, but soon, subtle changes begin. He starts to emphasize a particular deity, the Aten, the visible disk of the sun, not Ra, the sun god himself, but the disk of the sun, a more abstract, singular manifestation. You notice new temples being built, dedicated solely to the Aten, open to the sky, unlike the traditional enclosed temples of Amun. It's like your favorite band suddenly decides to only play one song, and they build a giant open-air stadium just for that one song. Set was not a completely evil god throughout time. In some early dynasties, he was even worshipped as a protector, especially in Upper Egypt, where he was seen as a god of strength and order. He could be called upon to fight Egypt's enemies. But over time, and especially as the story of Osiris and Horus became more prominent, Set became increasingly seen as the villain, the embodiment of Isfet, but what starts as emphasis quickly escalates into a radical, unprecedented revolution. Amenhotep IV changes his name to Akhenaten, meaning effective for the Aten, publicly declaring his devotion to this singular deity. He then takes the unthinkable step. He begins to suppress the worship of all other gods, particularly Amun-Ra. You watch in disbelief as the names of Amun are chiseled out of monuments, his images defaced, and his temples closed. Priests are dismissed, their vast wealth confiscated by the crown. It's not just a religious reform, it's a full-blown iconoclastic purge, a direct assault on centuries of deeply ingrained belief. You feel the unease when you hear his name. He is the sudden storm that sweeps across the desert, the hot wind that dries your throat, the chaos that can disrupt your daily life. His priests, if they existed, would be revered but also viewed with suspicion, for they controlled a power that was both necessary and dangerous. It's like having a friend who could help you move house, but who could also accidentally spill a can of paint on your carpet. You feel the shockwaves ripple through society. For generations, your life has been intertwined with the pantheon, the gods of the Nile, the gods of the harvest, the gods of the family. Now, suddenly, they are deemed irrelevant, even anathema. The very fabric of your religious existence is torn apart. Imagine the fear, the confusion, the quiet defiance. How do you explain to your children that the gods you taught them to revere are now forbidden? Next, think of Sobek, the crocodile god. You see giant crocodiles lurking in the muddy waters of the Nile, their yellow eyes peering out from beneath the surface. They are fearsome predators, and Sobek is the embodiment of this primal, uncontrollable force. Although he's associated with the fertility of the Nile and is sometimes seen as a protector, especially in areas where crocodiles are abundant, he is also a constant reminder of the river's deadly dangers. You will see temples dedicated to Sobek, sometimes with live crocodiles kept in sacred pools. Fed and revered, you will make offerings to him, hoping he will protect you from the attacks of the creatures he represents. But you also know that Sobek can be a god of punishment, bringing destruction to those who do not honor him or who have displeased other gods. He is a reminder that even the elements that bring life can bring sudden and brutal death. It is like having a beautiful car, but if you do not maintain it, it can turn into a giant robot and eat you. Akhenaten doesn't stop there. He abandons Thebes, the city steeped in the tradition of Amun, and establishes a completely new capital city. Akhetaten, modern Amarna, horizon of the Aten. You might be forced to relocate, leaving behind your ancestral home and the familiar cults of your local deities. This new city is built entirely in honor of the Aten, with open-air temples designed to receive the sun's direct rays. It's a bold, almost insane move, a complete break from tradition. And then, when you think of death, you cannot avoid Ammit, devourer of the dead. Ammit is not a literal god, and there is no cult or temple dedicated to her. Instead, she is a terrifying entity in the afterlife, a reminder of the ultimate punishment for unworthy souls. The religious revolution is not peaceful. While Akhenaten's hymns to the Aten speak of universal love and the Aten as the sole creator, his actions are anything but tolerant. The suppression of other cults is enforced with a heavy hand. Those who resist, particularly the powerful priests of Amun, face severe consequences. There are reports of arrests, imprisonments, and possibly even executions for those who openly defy the Pharaoh's new religion. This isn't a gentle persuasion, it's a forced conversion, backed by the full power of the state. You picture yourself in the Hall of the Two Truths, the heart of post-mortem judgment. Your heart is weighed on a scale, facing the feather of Mayat. If your heart weighs more than the feather, meaning you have lived a life of sin and injustice, then Amit will be there, with the head of a crocodile, the forequarters of a lion, and the hindquarters of a hippopotamus. She is a composite monster, created from the most terrifying creatures of Egypt. She waits, mouth open, ready to devour your unworthy heart. Think about the artisans who had spent their lives carving images of Osiris, Isis, and Horus. Now, they are commanded to depict only the Aten, often as a sun disk with rays ending in hands, offering life. The traditional artistic conventions are discarded for a new, more naturalistic style that, while beautiful in its own right, is a radical departure from the established norms. Even art becomes a tool of religious enforcement. You feel a chill run down your spine when you think of Amit. She represents total annihilation, the absence of eternity. There is no afterlife, no rebirth, only the end. For a culture obsessed with the afterlife, this was the most terrifying punishment imaginable. It was the ultimate fear, a reminder that even in death, Mahat's cruel justice was still being carried out. The common people, Isam, who relied on the traditional gods for protection and guidance in their daily lives, found themselves in a spiritual vacuum. How do you pray for a safe childbirth without Taweret? How do you ensure a bountiful harvest without Renanutet? The Aten, being a singular abstract deity, was perhaps too distant, too intellectual, for the everyday needs of the populace. This created a profound sense of unease and resentment, a quiet simmering beneath the surface of official devotion. A popular historical fact regarding the appeasement of the wrathful gods is the drunken festival of Hathor, Sekhmet. To commemorate the story of Sekhmet and the red beer, the Egyptians held an annual festival. During this festival, large quantities of beer were dyed red and drunk to appease the goddess, to prevent her from unleashing her wrath again. It was a grand event with music, dancing, and drinking, all aimed at keeping the bloodthirsty goddess in a happy state. Akhenaten's reign is marked by this intense focus on the Aten, to the exclusion of almost everything else. While he is building his new city and enforcing his new religion, the empire itself begins to suffer. Foreign relations are neglected, and Egypt's influence abroad wanes. This decline is later attributed to his heresy, a clear sign that his deviation from Ma'at had brought chaos upon the land. It's like being so obsessed with your new hobby that you forget to pay your bills and your house gets repossessed. A unique or little-known detail of divine punishment was the practice of damnatio memoriae, condemnation of memory. When a pharaoh or individual was deemed to have displeased the gods or caused serious chaos, their name could be erased from monuments, statues, and king lists. Their faces could be carved from reliefs. This was not just a political act. It was an attempt to erase that person from history and, more importantly, from the afterlife. If your name was no longer remembered, you could not exist in eternity. It was a brutal form of soul destruction, carried out by the living to ensure that the gods would never see or remember that person again. It was like having yourself erased from all family photos. But if you were a pharaoh, it meant that you would never be able to send messages to your grandparents in the afterlife. And here's an open scholarly debate. Historians still debate whether Set was actually widely worshipped as a protector god in certain periods, or whether his worship always had a negative connotation, associated with the necessary but dangerous aspects of the world. The change in how he was portrayed and worshipped across dynasties is a complex subject, revealing the flexibility and sometimes contradictions of Egyptian religious belief. One common historical fact about Akhenaten's revolution is its monotheistic or perhaps monolatrous nature, a radical departure from the polytheistic traditions of ancient Egypt. While not strictly monotheistic in the modern sense, as the Aten was still a god within a broader cosmic framework, it was unprecedented in its insistence on the sole worship of one deity and the suppression of all others. You realize that the Egyptian gods were not one-dimensional entities. They were manifestations of the universe in all its complexity, beauty, and brutality. They could bring life and fertility, but they could also unleash plague, war, and destruction. Their worship was not just an act of reverence, it was a bargain, a constant effort to appease their wrath and maintain the delicate balance of Ma'at. A lesser-known detail is that Akhenaten's religious reforms extended even to funerary practices. Traditional funerary texts and spells from the Book of the Dead, which invoked various gods to guide the deceased through the underworld, were replaced with new hymns and prayers to the Aten. This meant that if you died during Akhenaten's reign, your journey to the afterlife would be fundamentally different, potentially jeopardizing your eternal existence if the Aten did not recognize the traditional paths. It's like suddenly changing the rules of a very important game, right in the middle of it, when your life depends on winning. You feel a new respect, and perhaps a little fear for these gods. They are not distant, indifferent beings. They are powerful, omnipresent forces that can intervene in your life in surprising ways. You live under their gaze, your every action capable of pleasing or angering them. And here's a point of ongoing academic debate. Historians still debate the true motivations behind Akhenaten's religious revolution. Was it a genuine spiritual awakening? A philosophical leap towards monotheism? Or was it a calculated political move to curb the immense power and wealth of the Amun priesthood, which had grown to rival that of the pharaoh himself? The interplay between religious conviction and political expediency remains a complex and fascinating area of scholarly discussion. When you close your eyes, you can hear Sekhmet roaring in fury, Set storms, Sobek's splashing waters, and Amit's terrifying growls. These sounds, though only in your imagination, are a vivid reminder that ancient Egyptian religion is more than just sweet dreams of paradise. It is a world where the gods can be your best friends or your worst enemies, and their wrath is a terrifying force that must be respected and appeased. The sound of your fan now sounds like a comforting whisper, trying to chase away the terrifying images of angry gods. But you know they are still there, lurking in the shadows of history. The violent backlash against Akhenaten's reforms began almost immediately after his death, and perhaps even before. His successors, particularly Tutankhamun, originally Tutankhaten, living image of Aten, quickly reversed his policies. The cult of Amun was restored, the temples reopened, and the names of the old gods were reinscribed on monuments. Akhenaten was abandoned, its stones later dismantled and reused, as if to erase all memory of the heretic king. You still feel the lingering chill of divine wrath, the echoes of Sekhmet's roar and Set's chaotic winds, a stark reminder that the gods of ancient Egypt were not always benevolent. Having understood the iron grip of Ma'at and the formidable power of the pantheon, you now turn your gaze towards the very heart of their religious practice rituals. But these weren't always gentle ceremonies. Tonight, we explore the sacred violence, the sacrifices, and the profound, sometimes brutal, meaning embedded within the ancient Egyptian rituals. You see the fury of the traditionalists unleashed. Akhenaten's name is systematically removed from king lists, his monuments defaced, and his very existence condemned. He is referred to as the enemy, or the rebel, his reign a dark stain on Egyptian history. This wasn't just a political correction, it was a religious cleansing, an attempt to restore Ma'at after what was perceived as a catastrophic period of Isfet. The violence of the backlash was a mirror image of the violence of his reforms, a testament to the deep-seated nature of Egyptian religious belief. Imagine yourself standing in the courtyard of a grand temple, the air thick with the scent of burning offerings and the low murmur of priestly chants. The sun, a golden orb, casts long shadows across the stone. You might expect a scene of quiet devotion, of humble prayers, but as the ritual unfolds, you begin to perceive a deeper, more primal undercurrent. The line between symbolic action and visceral reality blurs, and you realize that for the ancient Egyptians, sacred violence was not an oxymoron, but a necessary component of maintaining cosmic order. The Amarna period, as Akhenaten's reign is known, serves as a powerful reminder that even in a seemingly stable and tradition-bound society like ancient Egypt, religious belief could be a source of profound conflict and violent upheaval. When the divine order was challenged, the response was often fierce and unforgiving, driven by a desperate need to restore balance and appease the angered gods. Consider the daily temple rituals. Every morning, the high priest, acting as the pharaoh's proxy, would enter the innermost sanctuary, the Holy of Holies, to awaken the cult statue of the god. This wasn't just a polite greeting, it was a meticulous, almost surgical process. The statue would be purified with incense and water, dressed in fine linen, adorned with jewelry, and offered elaborate meals. While seemingly peaceful, these acts were imbued with immense power and a subtle form of control. The god was being ritually fed and cared for, ensuring their continued benevolence and preventing their destructive potential from being unleashed. It's like making sure your grumpy cat gets its favorite tuna, because if it doesn't, well, your curtains might suffer. As the imagined chaos of Akhenaten's revolution fades, and the sounds of chisels defacing ancient names recede, you feel the gentle hum of your fan. You now understand that even within the seemingly unified faith of ancient Egypt, there were periods of intense religious struggle, where the pursuit of a new divine vision led to a violent rejection of the old. The peace you once imagined was often a hard-won truce, constantly threatened by both external enemies and internal ideological battles, all in the name of what was believed to be the true cosmic order. But beyond these daily acts of appeasement, there were grander, more public festivals and rituals that often involved a more direct confrontation with the forces of chaos, sometimes through symbolic violence. Take, for instance, the rituals performed during the Apet festival, a major annual event where the cult statues of Amun, Mut, and Khonsu traveled from Karnak to Luxor. While largely a joyous procession, it also involved rites designed to reaffirm the pharaoh's power and to ritually defeat the enemies of Egypt. You've just witnessed the dramatic and violent upheaval of Akhenaten's religious revolution, a stark reminder that even a seemingly unified faith could be torn apart from within. Now, as the echoes of chisels defacing ancient names fade, and the hum of your fan returns, you prepare to explore another layer of complexity in ancient Egyptian religion, the often tense relationships between different cults and local deities, revealing a subtle yet persistent undercurrent of sectarian strife. You might witness the pharaoh, or his priestly representative, symbolically striking down effigies of foreign enemies, or even clay tablets inscribed with their names. These weren't just theatrical displays, they were acts of execration, magical rituals intended to inflict real harm and destruction upon the enemies of Ma'at. The smashing of these effigies was a visceral act, a symbolic annihilation that was believed to have tangible effects in the real world. It was a form of spiritual warfare, where the ritual act itself was the weapon. Imagine yourself not in the grand capital, but in a smaller town, perhaps nestled along a bend in the Nile, or in a remote oasis. Here, the local god, the patron deity of your village or region, holds immense importance. While you acknowledge the great state gods like Amun-Ra, Osiris, and Isis, it is your local god who truly watches over your daily life, who ensures the fertility of your fields, the health of your family, and the safety of your journey. This intimate connection to a local deity fostered a fierce loyalty, sometimes leading to friction with other cults. Think about the sheer psychological impact of witnessing such a ritual. You see your pharaoh, the living god, ritually crushing the very essence of your enemies. It instills a sense of security, a belief that the divine power of Egypt is actively protecting you and destroying those who would threaten your way of life. It also reinforces the idea that Chaos Isfet must be actively, even violently, suppressed for Order Ma'at to prevail. You see the small, humble shrine dedicated to Sobek, the crocodile god, in one village, where the people offer fish and prayers for protection from the Nile's dangers. Just a few miles downriver, in another village, the primary devotion might be to Hathor, the cow goddess, celebrated with joyous music and offerings of milk. These distinct local cults, each with its own traditions, festivals, and priestly hierarchy, coexisted, but not always without tension. It's like being a fan of one sports team, and your neighbor is a fan of their bitter rival. You might share a fence, but game day is always a little tense. The concept of sacrifice, too, was central to their religious practice. And it wasn't always just about offering bread and beer. While animal sacrifice was common cattle, birds, and other creatures offered to the gods in temples and at altars, the underlying principle was one of giving up something valuable to gain divine favor, or to avert divine wrath. The animal's life was given, its blood shed, to sustain the gods and maintain the cosmic balance. The power and influence of a particular cult often waxed and waned with the fortunes of its associated city or region. When a pharaoh hailed from a certain area or favored a particular deity, that god's cult would rise in prominence, often at the expense of others. The rise of Amun-Ra during the New Kingdom, for instance, saw his priesthood accumulate immense wealth and political power, leading to resentment from the cults of other gods. This wasn't always a peaceful ascension. It could involve political maneuvering, economic pressure, and subtle forms of suppression. You might see priests ritually slaughtering a bull, its blood flowing onto the altar, its meat prepared for the gods, and then consumed by the priests and sometimes the populace. This act was not seen as cruel, but as a necessary exchange, a vital link between the human and divine realms. The life force of the animal was transferred, nourishing the deity and ensuring the continued prosperity of Egypt. It's a bit like giving up your favorite snack to your friend, hoping they'll share their new video game with you, except, with more blood and less gaming. Think about the sheer number of deities in the Egyptian pantheon. While some were universally recognized, countless others were local, regional, or even household gods, each with their own devotees. This rich tapestry of belief meant that while there was a general shared understanding of the cosmos, the specific focus of worship could vary dramatically from one community to another. This diversity, while enriching, also created potential for rivalry, particularly when resources or prestige were at stake. While human sacrifice is generally believed to have been rare and largely confined to very early dynastic periods, or perhaps in very specific, extreme circumstances, the symbolism of human sacrifice was certainly present. The pharaoh himself, through his divine connection, was seen as embodying the entire nation, and his actions, including his ritualistic smiting of enemies, could be interpreted as a symbolic offering of the other to the gods. You might hear whispers of a dispute between two towns over the rights to a particular sacred grove, or arguments over which god was truly responsible for a recent miracle or misfortune. These weren't always violent clashes, but they were certainly expressions of sectarianism, of a belief that our God is better, more powerful, more beneficial than yours. This competitive spirit, while often contained, could flare up, particularly during times of political instability or economic hardship. Consider the Sed Festival, a jubilee celebrated by the pharaoh after 30 years of rule, and then every 3 years thereafter. This festival was designed to rejuvenate the pharaoh's power and ensure his continued ability to rule. While the exact rituals are debated, some scholars suggest that elements of the Sed festival may have contained echoes of earlier, more literal human sacrifices, where the pharaoh's vitality was renewed through a symbolic death and rebirth, or even the ritualistic killing of a king who had become too old or infirm in prehistoric times. This is a fascinating, if unsettling, thought, suggesting that the memory of such practices lingered in their elaborate ceremonies. The priests of different cults, too, wielded significant power. They managed vast estates, controlled immense wealth, and influenced local politics. Their loyalties were primarily to their specific deity and its cult, and they would often compete for royal patronage, land grants, and influence at court. This competition, while usually played out in the halls of power, could trickle down to the common people, fostering a sense of rivalry between devotees of different gods. The very act of mummification, while focused on preserving the body for the afterlife, also had elements that could be seen as a form of sacred violence. The body was cut open, organs removed, and the brain extracted through the nose, a process that was both meticulous and invasive. While done with reverence, it was a profound alteration of the human form, an act of controlled destruction and reconstruction to prepare the deceased for their eternal journey. It's a bit like taking apart your old computer to build a new, super-powered one, but with more natron and less RAM. Consider the theological debates that might have arisen. While the Egyptians were generally syncretic, meaning they often merged or identified different gods with each other, Amun-Ra, there were still distinct theological perspectives. Some cults might emphasize certain attributes of a god over others, or interpret myths in ways that favored their patron deity. These theological differences, while perhaps not leading to outright war, certainly created distinct identities and occasional friction between groups of believers. One common historical fact that highlights the ritualistic violence is the opening of the mouth ceremony. This crucial ritual was performed on mummies and cult statues. It involved priests touching the mouth and eyes of the deceased or statue with special tools, symbolically opening them so that the deceased could eat, drink, speak, and see into the afterlife, and the statue could embody the god. While not violent in a literal sense, it was an invasive ritual, a symbolic act of reanimation that was essential for the soul's continued existence. One common historical fact about the clash of cults is the long-standing rivalry between the cult of Amun in Thebes and the cult of Ra in Heliopolis. While eventually syncretized into Amun-Ra, their respective priesthoods often competed for influence and royal favor, particularly during periods when the capital shifted or new dynasties emerged. This historical tension reflects the broader competition between powerful religious institutions. A lesser-known detail is the use of apotropaic magic and rituals, which were designed to ward off evil and protect against malevolent forces. These often involved the creation of amulets, spells, and even specific gestures or dances that were believed to violently repel demons or hostile spirits. For example, the use of knives or daggers in funerary contexts wasn't just for protection. It was to symbolically stab and neutralize any threats to the deceased's journey. You might have seen small, stylized knives placed in tombs, not as weapons for the dead, but as magical tools to fight off evil. A lesser-known detail is the occasional desecration of rival cult images or monuments during periods of intense religious or political strife. While not as widespread or systematic as Akhenaten's Purge, there are instances where the names or images of certain gods were defaced by adherents of a rival cult, indicating a deliberate act of religious aggression or a symbolic assertion of dominance. It's like your rival sports team spray painting your team's logo on your stadium wall, but with more ancient stone and less spray paint. And here's a point of ongoing academic debate. Historians still debate the precise nature and extent of sacred prostitution in ancient Egypt. While some texts suggest a connection between certain priestesses and sexual rites, particularly in cults related to fertility goddesses like Hathor, the exact role and meaning of these practices, and whether they constituted prostitution in the modern sense, remains a highly controversial and debated topic among Egyptologists. It's a complex area where modern interpretations often clash with ancient cultural nuances. And here's a point of ongoing academic debate. Historians still debate the extent to which these clashes of cults truly represented deep-seated theological disagreements among the common populace, or if they were primarily reflections of political and economic rivalries between powerful priestly institutions, with the common people largely remaining pragmatic in their worship of various deities as needed. The degree of genuine sectarian belief versus institutional competition remains a nuanced area of discussion. You also encounter the concept of ritual purity and the severe consequences of violating it. Priests underwent rigorous purification rituals, including shaving their entire bodies, abstaining from certain foods, and performing ablutions multiple times a day. Any impurity could offend the gods and invalidate the ritual, potentially unleashing divine wrath. The fear of impurity, and the lengths to which they went to avoid it, highlights the precariousness of their relationship with the divine. It was a constant, almost obsessive effort to maintain a state of ritual cleanliness, knowing that a single misstep could have cosmic repercussions. You also see how foreign deities, introduced through conquest or trade, could sometimes cause friction. While many foreign gods were assimilated into the Egyptian pantheon, their introduction could occasionally challenge established traditions or loyalties. For example, the worship of Syrian deities like Baal and Astarte, while embraced by some, might have been viewed with suspicion by more traditional Egyptians, especially if these cults gained significant popularity or royal patronage. You've emerged from the chilling depths of the Duat, the echoes of Amit's growl still faintly resonating in the quiet hum of your fan. You now understand that the ancient Egyptian afterlife was a perilous journey, not a guaranteed paradise. But the dangers weren't confined to the realm of the dead. In life, too, The Egyptians faced enemies both visible and invisible, and they possessed powerful tools to combat them. Tonight, we uncover the darker side of their magical practices, the art of cursing, the rituals of execration, and the use of destructive spells to annihilate their foes. The concept of divine lists or pantheon lists on temple walls, while seemingly orderly, also implicitly ranked deities. And the prominence given to certain gods over others could be a source of subtle tension. A god placed lower on a list, or whose cult received less state funding, might be seen as less important, leading to a sense of marginalization among its devotees. The construction of temples themselves can be seen as an act of sacred violence against the wilderness. By imposing order and monumental architecture upon the natural landscape, the Egyptians were, in a sense, subduing chaos and extending the domain of Ma'at. The cutting of stone, the quarrying, the immense labor involved, all were physical manifestations of their struggle to create and maintain a divinely ordered world. These were not just buildings, they were fortresses against the encroaching desert, bastions of order in a chaotic universe. Even within the same cult, there could be internal divisions. Different priestly families might vie for control of a temple, or different factions might interpret sacred texts in varying ways. These internal conflicts, while not always visible to the common person, were another layer of potential strife within the broader religious landscape. It's like a family argument over who gets to host Thanksgiving. But the stakes are divine favor and eternal salvation. Even the art, with its rigid conventions and symbolic representations, participated in this sacred violence. The smiting scenes, where the pharaoh is depicted crushing his enemies, were not just historical records, they were magical acts, designed to perpetually reenact the triumph of order over chaos. By carving these images into stone, they believed they were making them eternally effective, ensuring the continued subjugation of their foes. It's like drawing a picture of yourself winning the lottery every day, hoping it will magically make you rich. You realize that the image of a perfectly harmonious, unified Egyptian religion is an oversimplification. While there was a shared cosmological framework and a general acceptance of the pantheon, the practical realities of worship were far more fragmented and competitive. Local loyalties, priestly rivalries, and shifting political fortunes meant that the relationship between different cults was often one of uneasy coexistence, punctuated by periods of subtle or even overt conflict. You realize that the ancient Egyptians lived in a world where the sacred and the profane were inextricably linked, where every action had spiritual significance, and where the maintenance of cosmic order sometimes demanded profound, even violent, acts. Their rituals were not just expressions of faith, they were active interventions in the divine realm, attempts to control, appease, and even manipulate the powerful forces that governed their existence. As the imagined murmurs of competing cults fade, and the hum of your fan fills the silence, you now understand that the peace of ancient Egypt was not just threatened by external enemies or internal heresies, but also by the inherent tensions within its own diverse religious landscape. The clash of cults, though often less dramatic than a pharaoh's holy war, was a constant, underlying current. A reminder that even in devotion, human nature, with its rivalries and loyalties, found its way into the sacred. As you slowly pull back from these ancient scenes, the scent of incense fades, and the murmurs of the priests recede. The hum of your fan returns, a comforting, familiar sound. But you carry with you a deeper understanding of the ancient Egyptian soul. You now know that their religion, far from being passively peaceful, was a dynamic, often fierce, engagement with the raw power of the universe. It was a faith that understood the necessity of struggle, the power of sacrifice, and the profound meaning that could be found even in sacred violence, all in the relentless pursuit of Ma'at. You've journeyed through the harsh realities of Ma'at's enforcement, faced the wrath of angry gods, witnessed sacred violence in rituals, navigated the terrifying Duat, seen the destructive power of curses, understood the pharaoh's holy wars, and observed the internal strife of religious revolution and clashing cults. Now, as the final echoes of these ancient conflicts fade into the gentle hum of your fan, you arrive at the ultimate realization. Ancient Egyptian religion was not merely a system of worship, but a constant, unending battle against cosmic disorder, a state of eternal vigilance. You've journeyed through the rituals, witnessing the sacred violence and the profound acts of sacrifice that underpinned ancient Egyptian faith. Now, as the scent of ancient incense fades and the murmurs of the priests recede, you prepare for the ultimate passage, the journey into the Duat, the Egyptian underworld. Forget any notions of a gentle, sunlit paradise. Tonight, we delve into a realm of terror, a perilous landscape fraught with monstrous guardians, fiery lakes, and the ever-present threat of eternal annihilation. Surviving the Duat wasn't a given. It was a desperate, often terrifying struggle. Imagine yourself standing on the edge of the known world, gazing out into the vast, formless void. For the ancient Egyptians, this void was not empty. It was filled with the primordial waters of none, from which all creation emerged, and into which all creation could potentially collapse. The universe, what in their view was not a static, perfectly ordered place, but a fragile construct, constantly under threat from the forces of Isfet chaos, disorder, uncreation. Every sunrise, every flood of the Nile, every successful harvest, every peaceful day was not a given. It was a hard-won victory in an ongoing cosmic war. Imagine the moment of your death. Your last breath leaves your body, and suddenly, you are no longer bound by earthly constraints. But this isn't a peaceful ascent to the heavens. Instead, you find yourself at the threshold of a vast, shadowy realm, a mirror image of the world you knew, yet twisted and filled with unseen dangers. The air is heavy, not with the familiar dust of the Nile Valley, but with the chill of the unknown, the whispers of forgotten souls. This is the Duat, the underworld, the realm through which the sun god Ra journeys each night, battling chaos and where every deceased Egyptian hoped to pass to reach the blessed fields of Aru. You, as an ancient Egyptian, live with this profound awareness. Your existence is a perpetual act of maintaining Ma'at, of pushing back against the encroaching darkness. Every prayer you utter, every offering you make, every ritual you observe is a contribution to this grand, cosmic struggle. It's not just about personal salvation. It's about ensuring the very continuation of the world. It's like being part of a never-ending group project, where if you don't do your part, the entire universe gets an F. Your journey begins, not with a welcoming committee, but with the immediate challenge of navigation. The Duat is not a single, unified space. It's a labyrinth of caverns, rivers of fire, treacherous pathways, and gates guarded by terrifying entities. You carry with you the knowledge gleaned from the Book of the Dead, a collection of spells, incantations, and maps designed to guide you through this perilous landscape. But merely possessing the book isn't enough. You must know the spells, understand the names of the demons, and recite the correct words at the precise moments. It's like trying to navigate a new city without GPS, but every wrong turn leads to a monster that wants to eat your soul. No pressure, right? The daily journey of the sun god Ra through the Duat is the most potent symbol of this eternal vigilance. Every night, Ra descends into the underworld, battling the monstrous serpent Apep, the embodiment of chaos and darkness. Apep's sole purpose is to stop Ra's boat, to prevent the sunrise, and to plunge the world into eternal night and uncreation. This isn't a gentle lullaby, it's a terrifying nightly struggle, a cosmic wrestling match that determines the fate of all existence. As you proceed, you encounter the first of many guardians. These aren't friendly gatekeepers, they are fearsome beings with names like Eater of the Donkey, He who lives on worms, or the one who eats the excrement of the dead. Their forms are grotesque, often combining animal and human features in disturbing ways. They demand passwords, secret names, and specific incantations. Failure to provide the correct response means being devoured, trapped, or sent back into the void. You feel a surge of primal fear as you face these entities, their eyes glowing in the gloom, their forms shifting in the shadows. You imagine the priests in the temples, performing their intricate daily rituals, offering prayers and incantations to aid Ra in his nightly combat. These aren't just acts of devotion, they are active interventions, magical supports for the sun god. The very act of worship becomes a form of spiritual warfare, a collective effort to ensure that the sun rises again. You feel a sense of shared responsibility, knowing that your faith, your participation, contributes to this vital cosmic cycle. The Duat is also home to various monstrous creatures and entities that are not necessarily guardians, but are manifestations of chaos and danger. You might stumble upon lakes of fire, where the damned are consumed, or rivers teeming with venomous serpents. There are pits of darkness that threaten to swallow you whole, and regions where the very air is filled with the wails of tortured souls. This isn't a place for the faint of heart. It's a cosmic obstacle course, designed to test your purity, your knowledge, and your resolve. The Pharaoh, as the living Horus, is the chief general in this eternal war. His role is to embody Mayat on Earth, to ensure that human society mirrors the divine order, and to actively combat Isfet wherever it manifests. This means not only leading armies against foreign enemies who are seen as agents of chaos, but also ensuring justice, maintaining social harmony, and performing the correct rituals. Every act of governance, every legal judgment, every building project is ultimately an act of upholding Mayat against the forces of disorder. One of the most terrifying aspects of the Duat is the constant threat of second death, or annihilation. For the ancient Egyptians, true death wasn't the cessation of life, but the complete destruction of the soul, the inability to exist in the afterlife. If you failed the tests, if your heart was too heavy, or if you simply couldn't navigate the perils of the Duat, your soul would be utterly destroyed, often by the beast Ammit, the devourer of the dead, whom we met in the last chapter. The thought of being consumed, of ceasing to exist entirely, was the ultimate horror, far worse than any earthly suffering. It's like getting a game over screen. But then the console just explodes, and you can never play again. Think about the constant threat of famine, disease, or a failed Nile flood. These weren't just natural disasters, they were interpreted as signs that Isfet was gaining ground, that Mayat was being disturbed. This led to frantic prayers, elaborate rituals, and sometimes desperate measures to appease the gods and restore balance. The fragility of their existence, constantly dependent on the Nile and the sun, reinforced their belief in the precariousness of cosmic order. It's like trying to keep a sandcastle from collapsing on a windy beach. But the wind is literally the embodiment of evil. The journey through the Duat culminates in the weighing of the heart ceremony in the Hall of Two Truths. This is the moment of ultimate judgment, where your fate is decided. You stand before Osiris, the benevolent ruler of the underworld, but also a stern judge. Around him are the 42 divine judges, each representing a specific sin you must deny having committed. Even the process of mummification and the elaborate funerary rituals were part of this eternal vigilance. By preserving the body and equipping the deceased with spells and offerings, they were ensuring that the individual soul could successfully navigate the perils of the Duat and achieve rebirth in the field of reeds. Each successful passage to the afterlife was a small victory against the forces of annihilation, a reaffirmation of life over death and order over chaos. It's like preparing for a really important exam, but the stakes are your eternal existence, and the exam proctor is a monster. Your heart, the seat of your intellect, emotions, and morality, is placed on one side of a great scale. On the other side rests the feather of Ma'at, representing truth and justice. You must recite the negative confession, a long list of declarations stating all the evils you have not done. I have not stolen. I have not killed. I have not lied. I have not caused pain. I have not polluted the water. It's a rigorous self-examination, a final accounting of your life's adherence to Ma'at. The Egyptian worldview was fundamentally cyclical, but this cycle was not automatic. It required constant effort, constant vigilance, and constant battle. The sun sets and rises, the Nile floods and recedes, life gives way to death and then rebirth, but each transition was a moment of vulnerability, a point where chaos could assert itself. Their entire religious system was designed to manage these transitions, to ensure the continuity of the cosmos through active intervention. You feel the immense weight of this moment. The slightest tremor in the scale, the smallest imbalance could spell your doom. Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom and writing, stands ready to record the verdict. And lurking nearby, with its composite body of crocodile, lion, and hippopotamus, is Ammit, patiently waiting. If your heart is heavier than the feather, if your life was found wanting, Ammit will devour your heart, and your soul will be annihilated, never to reach the field of reeds, the blissful paradise. One common historical fact that highlights this eternal vigilance is the concept of the Book of Gates and the Amduat. These funerary texts provided detailed maps of the underworld, hour by hour, depicting Ra's nightly journey and the various demons and obstacles he and the deceased had to overcome. These weren't just stories. They were practical guides for navigating the cosmic battle, emphasizing the active role of both gods and deceased in maintaining order. This judgment wasn't just symbolic. It was a terrifying reality for them. Their entire life was a preparation for this moment. Every good deed, every prayer, every ritual performed was an attempt to ensure that their heart would be light enough to pass the test. The fear of Amit, the fear of annihilation, was a powerful motivator for living a life in accordance with Ma'at. A lesser-known detail is the practice of apotropaic magic, which was not just for warding off curses, but for actively repelling the forces of chaos from daily life. This included charms, amulets, and even specific gestures or household rituals designed to keep malevolent spirits and the agents of Isfet at bay. Every home, every individual, was a small battlefield in the larger cosmic war, constantly defending itself against unseen threats. It's like having a really good security system, but it's powered by ancient spells and tiny statues. One common historical fact about the Duat is that the Book of the Dead was not a single, standardized text, but rather a collection of spells and incantations that varied over time and from individual to individual. Wealthy Egyptians would commission their own personalized copies, often inscribed on papyrus and placed in their tombs. These spells were meant to equip the deceased with the knowledge and power to overcome the dangers of the underworld and successfully navigate the judgment. And here's a point of ongoing academic debate. Historians still debate the extent to which the average Egyptian lived in a state of constant existential dread due to this belief in cosmic chaos. While the elite certainly engaged in elaborate rituals to combat Isfet, the daily life of a farmer or craftsman might have been more focused on practical concerns, with religious observance being a more routine, rather than intensely anxious affair. The degree of pervasive fear versus pragmatic faith remains a nuanced discussion. A lesser-known detail is the concept of demons of the Duat, often being depicted as grotesque and terrifying, but not always inherently evil. Many of these entities were simply guardians or tests, and if you knew the correct spells and names, they would allow you to pass. It was less about fighting them and more about demonstrating your knowledge and purity. However, their appearance was certainly designed to inspire fear and reinforce the perilous nature of the journey. Imagine a bouncer at a very exclusive club, but instead of a velvet rope, he has a crocodile head and breathes fire, and you need to know his middle name to get in. The very act of building the pyramids and temples, those monumental testaments to their faith, can be seen as an act of eternal vigilance. These structures were not merely buildings, they were cosmic machines, designed to anchor Ma'at on Earth, to provide eternal resting places for pharaohs who would continue to fight chaos in the afterlife, and to serve as conduits for divine energy. Their sheer permanence was a statement against the fleeting nature of chaos. And here's a point of ongoing academic debate. Historians still debate the extent to which the average Egyptian truly understood or believed in the literal geographical layout of the Duat, as depicted in texts like the Amduat, a detailed map of the underworld's hours. Was it a literal map, a metaphorical journey, or a combination of both? The precise interpretation of these complex cosmological texts remains a subject of scholarly discussion, highlighting the nuanced ways in which ancient Egyptians perceived their afterlife. Even the artistic conventions, with their rigid forms and symbolic representations, contributed to this vigilance. By depicting scenes of order, of pharaohs triumphing over enemies, and of gods maintaining balance, the art itself was believed to actively reinforce Ma'at, to magically perpetuate the desired cosmic state. Every carving, every painting was a spell, a prayer, a weapon in the fight against disorder. The journey through the Duat wasn't just a passive waiting game, it was an active, arduous struggle. You had to prove yourself worthy, not just through your earthly deeds, but through your knowledge of the divine, your ability to recite the correct spells, and your courage in facing unimaginable horrors. The very act of dying was just the beginning of a terrifying adventure, one that could end in eternal bliss or utter oblivion. You realize that ancient Egyptian religion was a dynamic, active, and sometimes fiercely combative system. It was a faith born from the observation of a world that was both bountiful and brutal, where life and death were inextricably linked, and where order was a precious, hard-won commodity. The peace you initially perceived was not an inherent state, but the fragile result of an ongoing, relentless struggle against the forces of chaos. A struggle that required the eternal vigilance of gods, pharaohs, priests, and every single Egyptian. Even for the pharaoh, the divine ruler, the journey through the Duat was fraught with peril. While he had access to the most powerful spells and the most elaborate burial preparations, he too had to face the judgment and navigate the dangers. His success was crucial for the continued prosperity of Egypt, as his rebirth in the afterlife ensured the cyclical renewal of the sun and the Nile. So, even the most powerful being in Egypt wasn't exempt from the terrors of the underworld. As the imagined echoes of cosmic battles finally fade, and the soothing hum of your fan fills the quiet of your room, you take a deep, calming breath. The journey through ancient Egypt's religion has revealed a world far more complex and intense than you might have imagined. You now understand that their faith, while beautiful in its aspirations for order and harmony, was also deeply rooted in a profound awareness of chaos, a constant battle against the forces that threaten to unravel existence. The serene images you once held are now layered with the understanding of fierce gods, perilous afterlives, destructive magic, holy wars, and the relentless, eternal vigilance required to keep the world turning. May your own night be filled with peace, undisturbed by the echoes of ancient struggles. You might imagine the deceased, perhaps your own ancient self, traversing dark passages, encountering strange creatures, and feeling the heat from fiery rivers. The air is thick with the scent of sulfur and the distant cries of the damned. You cling to the words of the Book of the Dead, whispering them to yourself, hoping you remember every syllable, every name. The stakes are impossibly high. The Egyptian emphasis on tombs, mummification, and funerary rituals wasn't just about honoring the dead. It was a massive, collective effort to ensure the deceased's successful passage through this terrifying realm. Every amulet, every inscription, every carefully placed offering was a tool, a protection, a guide for the soul's perilous journey. It was a society-wide investment in overcoming the horrors of the Duat. As you slowly drift back from the shadowy depths of the Duat, the imagined sounds of its monstrous inhabitants fade. The chill that settled on your skin begins to recede, replaced by the comforting warmth of your blanket. The hum of your fan, once a distant echo, now fills your room with its gentle drone. You take a deep breath, grateful for the familiar safety of your own bed. But you carry with you a profound new understanding. The ancient Egyptian afterlife was not a simple, peaceful transition. It was a terrifying gauntlet, a journey through terror where only the prepared, the pure, and the knowledgeable could hope to survive and achieve eternal bliss. The peace they sought was hard-won, earned through a lifetime of adherence to Mayat and a perilous passage through the Duat. You might find yourself in a court, watching a trial unfold. The accused stands before a panel of judges, perhaps even a vizier, the Pharaoh's chief minister. The atmosphere is solemn, heavy with the weight of divine judgment. The proceedings are meant to be fair, guided by the principles of Ma 8, but if found guilty, the consequences could be severe. We're talking about more than just a slap on the wrist.